There, I'm Tom Spencer. This time on Central Texas Gardener, we make connections to our ecosystem. Since bees play such an important role in plant pollination, today we identify some of these busy bees and how to protect them. On tour at Natural Bridge Caverns, find out how gardening at ground level affects what's happening 25 feet below. So let's get growing right here, right now.
Support for Central Texas Gardener comes from GeoGrowers, offering custom soil blends for lawns, gardens, xeriscaping, and organic landscaping supplies. More information at geogrowers.net. And also from The Blanket, a plant covering designed to be lightweight, breathable, and water resistant to help keep plants warm and dry during harsh winter weather. TheBlanket.com.
As gardeners, it's easy to focus on what's above ground or a few feet under, but see what's going on 25 feet below at Natural Bridge Caverns and why they rely on organic techniques in drought-tough gardens.
We tend to see what's on top of our gardens or a few feet under where we stick a shovel. But what's going on 25 feet below?
First off, what we're standing in right now is what we call a sinkhole. Geologists theorize that this used to be one of the tallest rooms in the cavern.
At Natural Bridge Caverns, just north of San Antonio, what's underground reveals our connection to what we drain on top.
It is very important because it's a part of the system of aquifers that give us our water. Here in this part of Texas, the aquifers are extremely important, and it's an opportunity to show what the aquifer looks like from the inside out. There are times when we're able not just to show them the groundwater dripping down, seeping through the limestone rock, carving out the cavern and then rebuilding the limestone in the shape of the speleothems, or sometimes called cave formations. We can show them that process, still in process. Occasionally we have so much rainfall, the aquifer will back up and can be viewed from inside the cavern on tour, and some of our guests have had the wonderful experience of being able to walk in the aquifer.
Natural Bridge Caverns is part of a large family ranch owned by the Wiest family. In March 1960, 4 students from St. Mary's University discovered the caverns while spelunking. By 1964, Reggie Wiest, his mother Clara Wolf Wiest Heidemann, and her husband Harry had developed and opened Natural Bridge Caverns to the public.
This is a natural limestone bridge that was once a part of the ceiling in a very large room in the caverns.
Over tens of thousands of years, groundwater dissolved limestone that eventually led to its collapse, leaving a sinkhole. Above ground, Natural Bridge Caverns wants to protect its other natural resources with plants that support wildlife. They garden organically since they know whatever they add on top will seep its way down.
We experienced that with the serpentine bed because we would water dramatically over there trying to keep it alive when we realized that it was only 25 feet above the cavern ceiling, so we had to back off on the watering over there.
When Gail and Joy restored the former ranch land to gardens, they knew what they wanted.
To tend towards the nature side of planting, more towards hummingbirds, foods for caterpillars, nectar plants for hummingbirds, butterflies, and native landscaping to sustain itself with very little work.
Their perennial design changes its color palette to follow the seasons, not only for the wildlife that depends on the food source, but to extend a warm welcome to everybody.
We want color all the time that looks good, that's inviting to our guests, that says, come walk this way. Color draws your eye. And therefore we put dramatic colors in certain places for the guests to see that will draw them to walk that way and venture about the grounds. We find that the folks that visit us love to see the hummingbirds and the butterflies, but especially in the birds in the bird baths because it's extremely entertaining. And we have those located throughout the grounds so that folks can have different areas to view or sit and visit and look. The cardinals love our sluice water features. We also find that the tanagers, the scarlet tanagers, they're attracted to people. They seem, we have benches in the south garden and our guests will sit there and they will come and perch on the branches above their head. They seem to be a people person bird. They love it when people are around.
To travel the features and family activities at Natural Bridge Caverns, they wanted to safely guide but not obtrude on the outdoor experience.
I find that the kids love to walk on pathways that wind, that lead them to someplace else. I learned after watching and being outside so much that people would just cut across the draw. And so we made a path for them to go on. But most of it is just so that it will say to me, walk this way, come this way. In making the pathways, it's always a task here because we are so rocky. What looks like a little rock above the surface turns out to be a really big one below. And we have to get help to get it out of the ground.
Weldon Price is among those who do it, since he signed on as a student in the beginning to develop the site. Now he manages all outdoor logistics and has trained generations of young tour guides. It's been hard work, especially after Joy lost her husband Reggie in 1998. But sons Brad and Travis stepped up to carry on their father's mission. Their natural gift was a gift of education about ecological responsibility to share.
It brings right to the senses what is going on beneath us, that it is so connected to the surface. It's so important to conserve areas like this. If you don't open them, at least some portion of them, to the public and allow all generations to experience it, it's very difficult for them to appreciate it. And a very wise conservationist once said that you will only protect what you care about, and you will only care about what you have experienced.
Well, it's fun to look at the garden from the underside for a change. Thanks so much for sharing that space with us. And now we're going to be turning our attention to buzzing activity in the garden. We're going to be talking about bees, and our guest is Kellan Vincent. Kellan, welcome to Central Texas Gardener.
Thank you very much.
You're a landscape architect and a bee guy.
Yes, that's pretty much it.
And real briefly, you work in a family-owned landscape architectural firm.
Yep, landscape design and build, so we do construction.
But you, a few years ago, you got hooked on bees. How did that happen?
It was kind of a random occurrence. I started getting interested in it. I have a garden myself, and we do lots of stuff like that. And we like a lot of homesteading type stuff, my wife and I. And so I started taking classes and enjoyed it and kind of got hooked and started researching more and more, and here I am. So.
Okay, well, they're fascinating creatures,
Yes.
and we absolutely depend on them for so much. I think humans are largely unaware how much we depend on bees. Let's start by talking about what kinds of bees our gardeners here in Central Texas find in their gardens. What are the common forms?
Probably the most common bees you'll see are honeybees, and that's due to the amount of them in each hive. There's generally between 20 and 100,000 per hive.
Wow.
So if you figure a third of those are all foraging, you have a lot of bees even just in 1 or 2 hives around your yard. The less common ones would be bumblebees, which you see more in North Texas. You start to see them down here, but they don't like the heat as much. And then another variety you'll see are orchard mason bees, or the mason bee species, and they are solitary. They basically don't have much of a hive structure at all, but they come out and they're very seasonal. They'll lay eggs, they'll die off, and then they'll come back again.
And are they the ones that actually kind of bore holes in wood and things like that? You sometimes see that.
Mason bees actually use existing holes.
Oh, okay.
Carpenter bees will actually be the ones that will bore holes in non-masonry, anything that's wood or trees.
Okay.
So.
Well, the honeybees, of course, are the stars of the garden, and the ones that people love to work with for obvious reasons. These are insects that really, as I indicated, we depend on them, but they're endangered right now, aren't they, in some ways?
They're a bit under threat, and there's been a lot of reasons for that. Some of the most recent research has said that actually pesticides have been a huge influence. But what I'll say about that also is the fact that because honeybees have so much contact with humans, and we can manage them and watch them, and we know their cycles very well. They're more of an indicator species rather than the only thing becoming extinct. So if you see the bumblebees decline, or the honeybees decline, excuse me, you'll actually see probably declines of bumblebees, and they're seeing that in Europe already, and you'll actually see declines in pretty much every pollinator due for the same reasons.
Oh, okay. So it's not just the honeybees.
No,
Okay.
it's just, those are the most easily tracked metric that we can come up with.
Okay.
So.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the difference in behavior, because some of these are such fascinating creatures, and we can get into more about how we can protect them in our gardens and how to lure them in and be good neighbors to them in just a moment. But there are really fascinating differences in the behaviors between these. And for example, the hive behavior of the honeybees is really complex, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, it's a complicated system. There are basically 3 classes. There's a queen, which is basically a mated female that can lay eggs. And she's the only bee that can lay eggs under normal circumstances. Then you have drones, which are all the males, and they don't forage, they don't do anything but basically eat honey and then go find queens to mate with. And then you have the worker bees, which are all females. They're unmated, so they don't lay any eggs, and those are actually the workhorses of actually most of the hive. So
This sounds familiar in some way.
a little bit. It's kind of a nice life.
And we were talking just a short while ago, and they have complicated behaviors, and they manage their environment in a way that really is quite astonishing.
Yeah, part of the conversation was talking about an air conditioning that the bees actually use, and one of the things we can do during summer especially is leave water out, because they'll haul water into the hive, they'll fill up empty cells, and they'll start fanning across that liquid. They'll fan across the water, and that fanning will actually create a temperature gradient and actually cool the hive off from the inside, and you'll see them, they'll do that a lot. And another case, they'll actually pile all the bees from the inside on the external of the hive. It's called bearding, to keep the temperature down, because they keep the body heat down in the hive. So they have a lot of temperature control and stuff like that.
It's really fascinating, and also the way that they communicate with each other is complicated, but we do know that it operates on smell, right?
Yes, it's pheromone based entirely. You'll see people with the bee beards where they have a bunch of, that's all it is. They take the queen's pheromone, and they'll put it on their beard, and they all attract. And the same way, that's how a queen keeps a hive. She puts off a certain smell. They'll replace her when she starts to decrease in the amount of pheromones she can give off, and they'll actually make a new queen to keep that hive intact.
Okay, and the bumblebees do have colonies, but they're not year-round colonies.
No, and that's the main difference. Honeybees collect honey to keep them going through the winter. It's all their food sources. They'll keep a hive at 92 year-round, regardless of external temperature. Bumblebees, they create, in the spring, you'll see a lone queen. She'll fly out, she'll forage, she'll find a place to nest. She'll start raising maybe 60 to 200 brood. And then at the very end of the season, she'll create queens. And those queens go out, the old hive dies, and then those queens will emerge back in the spring. So they don't need that honey stored year-round.
Perennial bee.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Pretty much.
Fascinating. Now let's get back to coexisting with the bees. You mentioned one thing that's important to do already, which is leave water out in the summertime. Have a place where they can collect it. And I've seen that at bird baths and other things. The bees line up. And I assume they were drinking.
They are. Yeah.
Okay. But what are some of the other pesticides? Really are lethal.
Yes.
All forms of pesticides.
And there's different schedules you can use. I mean, if you absolutely have to use something, and even organic is kind of a misnomer, because it's still lethal to most pollinators. I use a lot of BT and stuff like that, but I use it at night, and then it'll basically degrade during the day, and it can't really harm bees in most cases.
BT, what is it?
Bacillus.
Okay.
It's a bacteria.
Okay, I know what Bacillus thuringiensis is. I thought there was a special concoction you made for bees.
No, I wish. That would be very lucrative. But no, it's all in scheduling. If you have a flowering plant, never spray a pesticide. Don't spray herbicide. Don't spray anything. It'll bioaccumulate even if it says it's not lethal. And that's what they're discovering with colony collapse is, even though that the bees aren't being killed instantly, they're being very confused and disoriented, or one of the studies found 36 different pesticides in one comb. And they're feeding that to brood. So it's basically like creating a toxicity for a newborn. and that's what is causing birth defects and a lot of immune problems. And if you think about that from a bumblebee's perspective, which we're actually having a huge problem, and they're more important than honeybees in a lot of ways, if the queen goes out and forages on something with a pesticide in it, and that queen dies immediately, there is no new hive, they don't start over. And so that initial queen is very important when you're talking about a bumblebee colony, even in respect to a honeybee.
So no pesticides, really, what we're saying, if you really are going to be bee conscious.
Yes.
Now let's talk about what we can do to provide them with good nectar. What are their favorites here locally?
I've seen a lot of them. Flowering trees are your best bet.
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll walk around here and you will actually hear the trees buzzing. And the main reason is one large flowering tree is worth about 10 acres of wildflowers as far as forage goes.
Well, I have a possum haw holly right in front of my front door, and it literally, when it blooms for that short period in the spring, it buzzes.
Yep. Red buds, that's the one that they love here. I've seen them a lot on mountain laurels. Crepe myrtles, to a point, they kind of seem a little picky on that. Cherry laurels is what they're going after right now, and that's something I've seen a lot at my house. And so it's trees are probably the most compact, any fruit tree, any flowering fruit tree, even though it's a compact cycle, it's lots of nectar. And that's the big difference. A bumblebee goes after anything with pollen and a little bit of nectar. Honeybees will go mainly after nectar, and pollen kind of as a secondary. Okay. And so, and some flowers that honeybees can't get, bumblebees will.
Real briefly, how can people get more involved with learning about bees?
The fastest way, there's a lot of books, a lot of websites. Bee Source is a website that has a lot of beekeepers on it. I'm part of a group at San Marcos area, Bee Wranglers, and we meet once a month, twice a month. And then there's a class every January that has a really long waiting list now, but that it's a 4-week course through the month of January to teach you how to get started, and it's everything from hive management to plants to basically the whole encompassing schedule. So
bee herding.
Bee herding, it is, and sometimes it kind of looks like it. So.
Well, it's fascinating, and we really do appreciate you coming on the program. It's been way too long since we've talked about this subject, and it's, again, for humankind that depends so much on these incredibly complex little creatures. We appreciate you sharing your expertise with us. So thanks so much for coming on board.
No problem at all. Thanks for having me.
All right, and coming up next is our friend Daphne.
Hi, I'm Daphne Richards, and this is Augie Doggy. Our question this week is, why did our fall blooming plants bloom in the spring? Well, as often is the case with plants, weather is a key factor in their growth responses. Many temperate zone plants mark time with environmental cues. When the number of hours of sunlight begin to get shorter and temperatures begin to cool a bit, that means winter is on its way, a cue to plants that they should begin preparing for dormancy. And when the hours of daylight begin to increase and temperatures get warmer, plants begin preparing to wake up for spring. But when the weather patterns fall out of this norm, cold in winter and warm in spring, the internal timekeeping mechanisms of plants get confused. This past winter, we were abnormally warm and wet, with a lot of cloudy days. To many of our fall blooming plants, this weather seemed more like autumn than spring, and so they thought it was their normal flowering time. I noticed a lot of fall asters blooming around town. If your fall blooming plants bloom this spring and you'd like to encourage them to bloom again in the fall with their normal time, be sure to give them a good shearing to remove the spent blooms and encourage new buds to form. They'll likely stop blooming over the summer, but when our nights start to cool a bit and our days begin to get shorter, they should fall back into their normal autumn blooming habit. Our pick of the week is Texas star hibiscus, Hibiscus coccineus. This wonderful Texas native is also known as scarlet rose mallow. Although related to the tropical hibiscus that are found in Hawaii and other warm, wet regions, Texas star hibiscus is quite happy in temperate central Texas. It grows about 3 to 6 feet tall and about 4 feet wide and dies back to the ground in winter. As with other perennial shrubby plants, wait until temperatures begin to warm up in spring and then prune off all of the top growth down to the ground, and you'll begin to see new growth emerge from the roots. Resist the urge to prune off all the stems in late fall or early winter as soon as all the leaves have dropped off. As the plant is preparing to hunker down for winter, many chemical processes are occurring in those dead stems, and the leafless stems provide a little bit of protection from the cold. Unlike its tropical cousins, Texas star hibiscus can withstand most of our winters, barring any truly harsh freezes. Be sure to mulch well around the base of the plant to protect the roots from any out-of-the-ordinary cold spells. It can take full sun, but also does fine in part shade, although it may bloom a little less. Texas star hibiscus can handle wet soils, but works good in dry ones too. Although it will acclimate to our soils and need very little supplemental irrigation in normal times, if summer is particularly hot and dry, you'll need to water this plant. It spends the spring putting on green growth and then flowers all summer long, attracting a parade of hummingbirds and butterflies to your garden. The flowers are large, off-red, and more open than the showy tropical hibiscus, with 5 very distinct petals. Each flower is only open for a day, but new ones open all summer long. Gardener Randy Case says that Texas star hibiscus have made it through extreme drought and cold in his water-conserving garden. Gail at Natural Bridge Caverns reports that she does not baby them at all. They're the first plants up in the spring and the first ones to reseed in the fall. She doesn't usually have insect problems on them either, except a little pillbug damage and grasshoppers if it's a bad year. Gail also reports that she allows the seed pods to dry and then breaks them and scatters the seeds around where she wants more plants next year. And also, this plant easily propagates by cuttings. Lastly, Gail points out that she has had the occasional visit from the sheriff's deputy as the leaves of Texas star hibiscus do look strikingly similar to the leaves of a completely different illegal plant. We'd love to hear from you, so please visit klru.org/ctg to send us your questions or plants of the week from your garden.
Thanks, Daphne. Now let's check in with Jeff Pavlat for Backyard Basics.
Welcome to Backyard Basics. I'm Jeff Pavlat. The right tools are essential to any gardener. Most of my plants are cacti and succulents. To make these plants easier to work with, there are a number of helpful tools. Today I want to share with you some of the items in my toolkit. One of the most helpful things that I have are these large tweezers or forceps. And they come in really handy for removing debris within the leaves of sharp plants like agaves, and also weeds that love to get stuck right at the base of these plants. And also on cacti, you can use them to remove leaves. And they come in a set of 4 different sizes. There are also some sharper ones that for really fine little areas to reach in. And I also keep a pair of small tweezers for myself to remove any spines that get in me. Another helpful tool is a piece of wooden dowel, and it's cut to about 12 inches, and I use it when I'm repotting. And you can use it to smash the soil down around the edge of a plant, and it comes in real handy so your fingers don't get poked. You can also use chopsticks the same way. I also like to keep labels, and I use 2 different types of labels. First of all, I have these metal aluminum labels, and they're really handy because they don't ever break down. The plastic ones, actually, after about a year in the sunlight, get brittle. And I use a mechanical pencil to write on them. I just make sure to get one with a wide lead. And I keep kitchen brushes, and these can be used to clean out potting soil that gets in the leaves of the plants, or also a lot of times spider webs. And it's also handy to have a steak knife, and I have this plastic protective cover to keep from cutting myself. But this works well to remove leaves at the bottom of agaves, and also I keep a larger serrated bread knife for big plants. And I like to remove the old dead leaves off the agaves in my garden, and this works really well. It also is good for pruning prickly pear. And then these are hemostats, and they are really handy for grabbing spiny plants. All you have to do is press it down into the soil and lock these, and you can actually pick up the plant without getting your hand too close to the spines. And if you have plants in a flat, it's easy to grab one out of the center. And I also keep pruners and kitchen shears, which are good for trimming off just little sharp points. And these are aluminum ice scoops, and they work really well for potting soil. And I also like to top dress all of my plants with granite gravels, and the scoop also is handy for that. I think you'll find these tools helpful in dealing with some of the spiny things growing in your garden. For Backyard Basics, I'm Jeff Pavlat.
Watch online and find out more at klru.org/CTG. Next week, get a preview of the Austin Pond Society tour. Until then, I'll see you in the garden.
To learn about today's program, watch online and follow CTG's blog. Check out klru.org/CTG.
Support for Central Texas Gardener comes from GeoGrowers, offering custom soil blends for lawns, gardens, xeriscaping, and organic landscaping supplies. More information at geogrowers.net. And also from The Blanket, a plant covering designed to be lightweight, breathable, and water resistant to help keep plants warm and dry during harsh winter weather. TheBlanket.com.